It is 3 o'clock and we'll call this business meeting to order. Everybody's here?
Engelbert.
Here.
It says you.
Good.
Engelbert.
Here.
Fisher.
Here.
Zettel.
Here.
Wozniak here.
For motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second that.
I always joke properly noticed.
Yes.
Should have been asked first, Joe.
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to approve the July 7th, 2022 meeting and minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Changes, alterations, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, correspondence. We have one additional one.
There was one letter that didn't make it into the second package. Everything else is in one of the two packets.
Public comment. As I said earlier, we normally don't have a whole lot of public comment during our meetings. This particular agenda item is not a public hearing, it's purely a business meeting. So there's really no public statements made in that respect for it. So I'm giving you the opportunity to people that are in the audience. We'll follow our county board regulations, which is 30 minutes max, 3 minutes max per speaker. Please do not choose your words wisely. Repetitive information is not going to work any further or be of any value. Just need more time that's available for it. I do ask again that it be relevant information to our ability to actually act on something, not a personal view. You know, it's always been a quarry. As a child, it's always been a flatbed of rock for me. But make it, you know, information that we can actually act on when the project actually comes forward to us. Bayshore Property Association has expressed an interest to have 5 individuals to speak on their behalf. They will be presenting, as I understand it, a consecutive series of information that might answer an awful lot of your questions. The individuals that find that that is the case, I strongly recommend that you just say that I concur with all their information, or you agree with this, or you agree with that, just to make the meeting go along a little better. That being said,
I just said one thing.
yep.
There is a sign-in sheet wandering around the room for attendance, so make sure you sign that before you leave. It's going in the minutes. It's not for speaking. Like, I know the rules say that you have to sign in for speaking, but we're not doing
that. Supervisor Fisher brings up a good point. We are so used to doing hearings, we always introduce ourselves before the meeting. There's no hearing today. So as a courtesy, I'll have each one of us introduce ourselves.
Well, I'm Ken Fisher, District 6 Supervisor, parts of the city of Sturgeon Bay and the town of Sturgeon Bay.
I should say my name's the chair, David Enigal. I represent the village of Egg Harbor and portions of the town of Egg Harbor, Jackson Park.
Roy Engelbert, Supervisor for District 3, representing Ward 2 of the town of Forestville, Ward 2 of the town of Nassau-Waupee, and the town of Claybanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Hugh Zettel. I represent District 14, which is the eastern half roughly of the town of Sebastopol and the town of Sturgeon Bay that's north of the canal.
Hi everyone, my name is Morgan Rosnack. I represent District 11, which is the city of Sturgeon Bay.
Then we got Mariah, the director, and Chairman Keithley, zoning administrator. So let's start with Jim Schultz. Now, reminder, we have 3 minutes. We have a clock that's working. Okay. We'll try to give you a warning when we're getting closer to 3 minutes.
My name is Jim Schultz. I reside at 6780 First Lane in Egg Harbor. Thank you for giving the public the opportunity to speak on this matter. On April 12th, 2022, a letter from the Bayshore property owners to the RPC we expressed our concern regarding discrepancies between the 5 proposed plats and conformance to the conceptual plan with respect to ordinances and zoning ordinances. Section 3.03 of the Land Division Ordinance requires that the preliminary plat, quote, shall conform substantially to the conceptual sketch plan, unquote. Conceptual sketch plan proposed dividing 56.6 acres into 43 lots. The 43 lots were designed to use all but 6.82 acres of the property as residential lots. The fifth proposed plat deviates from the conceptual sketch plan in the area to be developed and the number of lots to be created by 43% and 37% respectively. The ordinance does not distinguish between deviations which increase or decrease the scale and the scope of the land division. Any proposed division which does not conform substantially to this conceptual sketch, as this one does not, must be denied if the ordinance is followed. Section 3.4 sub 3 of the zoning code requires that, quote, no lot shall hereafter be created which does not have access to a public road or a private road which is described and reported in the Door County Register of Deeds office, unquote. Lots 3, 4, and 5 are landlocked since none have access to a public or private road. Outlot 5 is landlocked because the access easement, even if it can be used, does not allow vehicles to be operated on the easement. Outlots 3 and 4 do not even have an easement access to the proposed private road. Since all 3 lots are landlocked in violation of the zoning code, that plat should also be denied. Thank you.
Normally, we don't ask questions. My simple question, it sounded substantially similar to what was in your letter that you submitted to the to us in the second package.
Yeah, what I covered was substantially similar to that.
So is it basically, are they going to be walking through those pieces?
Yes, and a very important piece.
Okay, thank you. Your Keith.
Keith Mutual, yes. I reside at 6451 Whitefish Bay Road. Although the DNR has approved stormwater and pond permits, the Bayshore property owners continue their concerns. In its application for the stormwater permit and its calculations of some of the anticipated discharge from the site, Quarry Bluff LLC represented to the DNR that all construction would be completed in one construction season. Yet, as of August 15th, they have advised the county they intend to only perform 1/3 of the work. When and if the balance of the work will be done depends on the sales of the proposed lots. This change not only calls into question the adequacy of the stormwater plan, but also impacts the already limited ability of the WDNR and county to oversee permitted projects such as this one. As importantly, it guarantees that for some unknown period of time, an only partially completed project will exist in the quarry with no assurance it will ever be completed. These statements from the developer create the concern for the execution and the completion of the plan, which should not be ignored. It has been documented multiple times how quickly the collected rainfall disperses into the karst structure of the bedrock after only a reasonable rain. What is proposed threatens not only to possibly exacerbate that, but also allow contaminants introduced into the quarry to be added to the groundwater. Environmental concerns for groundwater contamination have been aired on multiple occasions, and the risk of contamination at this site is extremely great. No project at this site should be approved unless the stormwater, groundwater, and construction plans are as environmentally sound as scientifically possible, and the project is shown to be financially secure. This proposal meets neither of those requirements. Thank you.
Brenda Lane. And just a real quick question, everybody can hear the speakers?
My name is Brenda Lang. I live at 6417 Whitefish Bay Road in Sturgeon Bay. The major land division fails to meet the intent and purpose of the comprehensive plans from the Town of Sevastopol Comprehensive Plan and the Door County zoning ordinance to, quote, promote the public health, safety, convenience, and general welfare, to encourage uses of land and other natural resources which are in accordance with their character and adaptability, to encourage the protection of groundwater resources, and to protect the beauty and amenities of landscape, end quote. The Town of Sebastopol Comprehensive Plan Update proposes that, quote, natural areas and open spaces provide recreational opportunities for residents and visitors and habitat for wildlife and preserve and protect Sebastopol's groundwater, end quote. It's important to recognize Sebastopol's plan intends to, quote, preserve and protect the historic resources of the town to promote the educational, cultural, and general welfare, and to continue to work with advocates to protect and preserve the Niagara Escarpment, end quote. The Door County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance indicates that the county will, quote, identify and preserve sites with significant scenic, historical, archaeological, and natural characteristics, end quote. The 57 acres is primarily zoned recreational commercial, and a 27-lot subdivision will remove it forever as a potential site of recreational, educational, and environmental enrichment for the general public. In Chapter 5, Door County proposes to, quote, preserve escarpments as landmark features that contribute to the scenic diversity and attractiveness of the county and avoid clearing of trees located within escarpment protection areas, end quote. How does this subdivision, albeit privately owned, meet the intent and purpose of either comprehensive plan? Please continue your stewardship of preserving and protecting Door County by denying this request for a major land division at the quarry. In closing, I would like to quote James Ingerson, a Sister Bay native and conservation artist who passed away in November of 2020. Quote, Door County is a little paradise that should be preserved and protected from hands that don't care about it, end quote. Thank you.
Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Moster. I live full-time at 6427 Whitefish Bay Road in Sebastopol. There's an endangered species living in the quarry. The presence of that endangered species has been known for over a year. Yet on the application for a stormwater construction permit submitted to the DNR and approved by the DNR on February 11th, 2022, Quarry Bluff LLC did not attach the required attachments and supplemental information for endangered species or threatened resources. A natural heritage inventory should have been completed by Quarry Bluff LLC prior to the DNR permitting, and a plan included in the stormwater runoff management plan. Quarry Bluff LLC and the landowner, the Margaret Dreutzer Trust, have not shown with a written plan that avoidance actions will be taken to protect the endangered species. And indeed, some disturbance actions have already taken place in the quarry. We have witnessed them. Land Use Services' proposal to prohibit all construction within 1/4 mile of the endangered species from March 15th to July 10th is a step in the right direction, but it does not provide the necessary assurance that the endangered species will not be harassed and driven from the quarry. The proposed land division should be denied since Quarry Bluff LLC and the landowner did not attach the required attachments and the supplemental information for the endangered species and threatened resources, and did not complete a natural heritage inventory review, and therefore did not submit a complete stormwater runoff management plan to the DNR. Thank you very much for listening.
Last move the group is Jim.
Good afternoon. I'm James Mitchie. I live at 4159 Bayshore Drive full-time. I'm also the president of the Bayshore Property Owners Association. Substantial issues have been raised about this proposal involving issues of law compliance with county ordinances and the policies and the environmental protection requirements. If the committee believes more time is needed to fully understand and properly resolve these issues, it should deny the current plan. If you do that, there is no time limit or restriction as to when the matter can be resubmitted to the RPC with a new conceptual sketch, revised DNR plan, and permit. That will allow the applicant an opportunity to address the issues that have been raised. And just as important, it will allow the county additional time to evaluate the issues that have been raised to ensure that they are properly resolved. More plainly spoken, this is a half-baked cake and it needs to be sent back to the kitchen. Thank you.
Okay, the 5 that have requested to speak in advance have spoken. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak in public comment? Anybody else wishing to speak in public comment? Anybody else wishing to speak in
I'll
public?
speak.
State your name,
Lori Saxton.
please.
We have many properties up here in Sturgeon Bay. We've been here since the 1860s. I'm a Lori of the Lories. In fact, Sebastopol was always going to be called Lorryville until they changed it. So we've been here for many, many years. Our house has been here for 160 years. President Grant came to visit, so we've been around a while. I can tell you firsthand, there is no percolation going with any of these bedrock properties or any of the Niagara escarpment. Whenever the cherry industry was running, we had pink well water. We now also have condos over in Windermere. They had to stop development of Windermere because it didn't have proper percolation. So if you let anybody build up there, whatever they have up there is going to be draining down directly to the people below and directly into the water. You will be polluting the water. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak? Anybody else wishing to speak? Anybody else wishing to speak? All public comment for now. Thank you very much. Land division matter, preliminary plat review. Quarry Bluff Estates, Margaret Retzler. Trust property on Bayshore Drive across from George Penny County Park, Sebastopol, approximately 54.6 acres total, 27 lots and 5 outlots.
So before Pete gives you a technical overview, if you want to go to page 21 in your packets, which is also on the screen for those in the audience. And this has already been covered a little bit, but basically, pardon?
Somebody came up with this.
I think it was
That was
Pete.
Pete.
I think he's just to answer questions. Is this right?
You can stay standing, Pete.
It's okay, I'll be back.
So basically, this is a different process than the proposal that came last time. This is a land division. This is not a zoning permit that they're coming to you for. The land division ordinance is a completely separate ordinance. It's obviously intertwined because when we look at a land division that's proposed, we have to make sure that whatever is being proposed meets the zoning ordinance requirements in terms of, you know, lot size and all that kind of stuff. But this is a separate ordinance. There's separate statutes and there's separate county regulations and processes that govern. So as has already been commented in public comment, there was a conceptual plat that was brought to the Resource Planning Committee in June of 2021, which you approved. It did have more than the 27 lots that are being proposed now, but the layout is substantially similar for the 27 that are being proposed. And so that was why staff determined that it matches well enough. If it had been the reverse, if they had come to you last year with a 27 lot conceptual plan and now had come back this year with a 43 lot preliminary plat, we would have said, no, we need to start with the conceptual again. And so that conceptual plat was approved in June of 2021. And then after the conceptual plat review is the step that we're at right now, which is the preliminary plat review. So I provided the exact ordinance sections as far as what the Door County Land Division ordinance says for preliminary plat review. And preliminary is kind of a misnomer because really they have to bring everything now. So engineered road plans, stormwater plans, all the stuff that's in the packets that you have is all required now, because the final plat only comes to staff. Basically, the final plat needs to exactly match the preliminary plat in terms of lot layout and size and everything else. It just goes on different paper that the state requires to have recorded, and then different verbiage and signature blocks go on there. But as far as the preliminary plat, the committee shall review and approve conditionally or reject the preliminary plat application and shall state in writing any conditions of approval or reasons for rejection. And then there's also a provision that if you don't act within 40 days of submittal of a complete preliminary plat, the application shall constitute an approval of the preliminary plat. So you need to take some kind of action today or within 40 days. Probably should take action today. So there is no public hearing, as we've already discussed, that's conducted. The county has never had public hearings for plat review. It's just considered more of a technical process. So it's, you'll ask questions of the surveyor and if you need to of the potential developers. And this is obviously being discussed during the business meeting only. There is one thing that does need to be part of your discussion today. The Door County Land Division Ordinance does have a provision that says that a cul-de-sac shall not exceed 1,000 feet in length unless a greater distance is approved by the Resource Planning Committee. So you need to you need to address that matter one way or the other. Frankly, I don't know why that section is in the Land Division Ordinance. And there have been other plats that have come to the Resource Planning Committee over the years where people have asked for a waiver to that provision and you've granted it. So just, I guess, keep that in mind as you're looking at that topic later. And as I've already said, if the preliminary plat is approved, and then when the final plat is submitted, it gets reviewed and signed by staff only. And then there's certain statutory deadlines as to how long they have to get things recorded after that approval. So do you have any questions about process?
So in a nutshell, the intent of this meeting is to present before the governing body, the entity that oversees your department, and then when they provide the final documents for recording purposes, your job is to make sure that whatever was approved here matches what they present.
Right, and we used to bring final plats back to the Resource Planning Committee, but they look exactly like the preliminary plat. It's just literally different paper and the signature blocks, and they you don't have the topographic lines don't stay on a preliminary plat when you're getting it recorded and the other stuff. But so I would say probably 10 or 12 years ago, if not longer, we took that part of bringing it back to the Resource Planning Committee. I mean, staff's not going to sign it if it doesn't look like whatever the preliminary plat stuff. And then, as has already been alluded to, on the bottom half of that page and page 21 and on to 22 are the conditions that staff came up with regard to the proposed plat. Most of them, in fact, probably all of them, are either reiterating an ordinance standard that's already in the Land Division Ordinance, or are just kind of reiterating a permit that's out there at the state level with regard to either stormwater or the endangered species that's already been mentioned. The language with regard to that endangered species in sub C is directly from the DNR. We got the language from them as far as what their requirements would be. So we're reiterating that. Like I said, I think everything in here is reiterating something that's in the ordinance. Oh, other than the last one. So I'm sorry, the last two. No, take that back. So the condition L in the declaration of easement and restrictive covenants, they are saying that they're only going to do construction and blasting between 8 and 6. So we figured that might be something that you would want to reiterate since they're already voluntarily saying that. And then condition M, and again, I believe they're already, according to the verbiage that we've gotten explaining how they're going to develop the property, is that it should be developed in consecutive groups of lots and not sort of a patchwork of things being built and filled. I gave committee members a copy of my handwritten notes that's sort of a table of contents of the plat. So if there's something that you want us to pull up on the screen, we can do that. But otherwise, I think here's we give just a real brief.
I just wanted to say that we reviewed all the documents and the preliminary plat and believe the proposal meets the Land Division Ordinance. I want to reiterate that for for each well, a maximum of 4 units will be served by one well. And then they're gonna have shared holding tanks.
The same units will be shared holding tanks. So whatever 4 houses, say, building units are fed by one well.
I
Those
don't
4.
know if the holding tanks are the same as the well number, but they just specify that 4 units per well.
I thought you just said, if I may. But each unit will have a separate. So restate that because I probably just.
I'm sorry. No, so it says on the preliminary plat that all units will be served by holding tanks, but that they will be shared. I don't know a number.
Oh, don't know how.
How many units on
What
them?
configuration
Okay,
it will be.
okay.
And then,
For the restricted covenant provided by the developer, it states that only single-family residences are allowed, no duplexes, no mods. No occupancy developments.
we
So
did,
that was different too.
yeah, because last year there was some discussion about possibly duplexes. And we did provide, just so you can see that Tara's gone through it at least 3 times, the ordinance chapters with her color-coded notes as to the dates that she went through the chapter, checking on particular provisions, so. So with that, I guess if you want to ask us questions or have us pull things up, or if you want to have Pete come and give a technical overview, it's up to you how you want to proceed.
Any questions?
No, this.
Okay, well, of the department or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, most of it is on staff recommendation. I guess just the first one is why such a long period of time to do the stormwater? Why is it the date go through 2025? Especially if you'd like to have, the stormwater be done and mitigate runoff concerns as quickly as possible. Isn't that kind of an infrastructure type activity? You get all that done and done at once, not in a piecemeal fashion.
So that timeframe and that timetable, I guess, is what was approved by the Department of Natural Resources and Door County Soil and Water Conservation Department. That's not anything, we're just reiterating
What it is.
the agreements that, or the approvals, I guess, that came through those bodies.
There's no control over how they make those approvals from your department.
For both, right, I mean, so, yeah, and I should have said that as well. So a major land division plat does require a stormwater runoff control plan. And in this particular case, they're required to have a state approved stormwater runoff control plan. And then county soil and water department reviews that to make sure that they think that the DNR hasn't missed anything. And then they sometimes make suggestions about things that they would like to see in addition to the state or to kind of reinforce things. But both of those bodies have approved the stormwater plan and implementation schedule.
Would you mind, Mr. Zettel, if I ask the question? Because if I wait till the end of all your questions, I'll forget them. No, I'm gonna sit here and really look stupid. I'm the chairman of the LCC. I don't remember anything coming before us in a meeting. Granted, we only meet every 2 months. Is this something that just goes through the department and doesn't need to come back to the governing body for any kind of approval or even to let us know, hey, we're working on this? Because I have never heard about this
Through LCC.
through LCC.
Right, so it's just done at the staff level at Soil and Water. How that process came to be on that end, I don't know. There's been an interdepartmental agreement between Soil and Water and Land Use Services since the 90s about particular things that our department has to look at, like land disturbances or projects that require a stormwater runoff control plan or other things I'm not thinking of right now, that we hand off that piece of the project to them to look at. And then they come back and they say, yep, this looks good, or this is fine, but attach these conditions, or they make the applicant redo something. But then we basically just take what they tell us, and then that is what gets approved. So I don't think that's ever gone to the LCC. The LCC, you guys do have county policies and procedures that have been approved by the Land Conservation Committee. And I think that that's what staff compares the projects to, but I don't think that they've ever come to the committee.
Remember the erosion control plan layout and everything, and I'm sure Pete can speak to this when he gets up here, is a state government body entity, and that's what what they approved.
And the point is just.
No, I
that,
agree.
You know, to me, this sounds like kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, this isn't a $25,000 holding tank on some small little parcel. I would have thought that they would have brought that to the committee for at least to let us
And
know.
FYI,
Yeah, and FYI.
as the chair, you may want to speak to your.
I may want to.
But
Thank you,
remember,
Mr. Zettel, for the time.
you and I've been on this committee only for 10 years. You've been a lot longer. You know that you haven't seen a whole lot of these kinds of
That's
projects
right.
come through here.
So, you, so item D, E, and maybe F, relative to private and town roads.
Oh,
I
on
got
page
some
22.
feedback from the town of Sebastopol. The town of Sebastopol has a private and town road ordinance number 05-2002
Okay.
that needs to make sure that they're in compliance with that.
So
So I don't have the details of that ordinance, but I was.
you'd want to maybe add a condition that they need to comply with
Yes,
Sebastopol's.
to comply with that. Thank you.
What was the ordinance number again?
Yes, number 05-2002. Leo zipper era.
It's always been.
All utilities are underground, right, including telecommunication. And I think in G, correct? Relevant utility, so I'm assuming telecommunications would also be underground.
Yeah, I think the ordinance reads that.
And it mentioned the cable,
Yeah,
cable TV, and I think I would just
Probably
say,
outdated wording.
yeah,
I made a note that we need to look at.
you call it telecommunications because
So you want to have add telecommunications too.
as a chair of the broadband committee for the board, county board, that likely will probably be
So
fiber.
that'd be for H.
It's when it goes to that point. Yeah. So, yeah,
Okay.
H talks about cable television lines, so I would just say telecommunications lines in general. All right. Relative to the soil and water department, I approve stormwater plan and, oops, that's not it, sorry. Which one was that? Oh, it's L, sorry. Relative to the construction hours and blasting, having, just for the sake of transparency, I serve on the Plan Commission for the town of Sebastopol, just for transparency, and have been involved in the previous incarnation. And I know there was a lot of discussion about dust, et cetera, the blasting. I know there were some references, I believe, back in the material about, Bureau of Mines or other related regulations relative to, reducing dust and that sort of thing when performing these sorts of operations. So I'm assuming relative to, from an environmental perspective, dust control, dust management, similar to what we see on, highway construction, that sort of thing.
So you're asking that a condition would be added, saying that for anything regarding blasting, they need to comply with whatever state.
Blasting, road construction, just, the dust management.
Those big federal regulations.
Yeah, I'm.
Yeah.
Just one in general that hasn't been, or is mentioned a little bit. And that is, requirements for plants, topsoil placement, topsoil depth requirements. There's been some excellent recommendations of using native plants and maintaining topsoil from the county. As a Door County Master Gardener, there's a growing concern in the county about jumping worms. So, any soil that's moved in, making sure we can mitigate any risk relative to jumping worms that can destroy vegetation, and any work you do to promote vegetation in that space. And when we get to the technical discussion about stormwater, when we talk about topsoil, right, topsoil in essence kind of acts like a sponge and I didn't see any, just not be familiar with it, because I don't look at stormwater plans very often. Is there any consideration when you, in that design element, it talks about how much topsoil is there and how much of that acts as a sponge, relative to the stormwater runoff? And I'm just curious, and we can get that in the technical discussions, but I think the topsoil planting of things, natural barriers, those sorts of things, I think it's important. The last one is just relative to our ordinances that we have, that we've talked about screening, and they have some things in there relative to, don't put any wood piles in the front of the yard, et cetera. Again, from covenants perspective, my concern is, you have to take into consideration what it looks like from behind those houses too, for people that live 30 and 40 feet above them. Something that looks nice at that quarry level can maybe, and they hide it, from the house, may be objectionable and doesn't look, very pleasant from someone in the backyard. So I just from a consideration perspective, think of that storage building that's on Highway 4257, just south of the Pick and Save. We have a lot of ordinance talk about, vegetation control and things to hide from the road. And that was probably 18th Street. But, you're at an elevated Highway 4257 looking down at those sheds. And at every review we've had about any sort of project in the Plan Commission, everyone brings up those buildings because they look hideous from the highway. And so you're talking about homes, that are on an elevated upper level of the quarry, things can't look, they have to look as nice from up on top there as it does at the ground level where the development's going to be placed, just from a consideration of the neighbors. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions of the department? No? So we have a representative come up and speak, and maybe you can address some of the items that were brought up.
My name is Pete Hirth. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Wisconsin. I'm representing the developers. Tom Gels and Mike Parent are here with me today. If there'd be specific questions for them that they're better suited to answer, I will defer some of those questions to them. Couple clarifications. One, the 2025 for the stormwater management, that expiration. So when you get a stormwater permit from the DNR, that must be a 3-year window
Normally it's a
before.
3-year window.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you can build the houses and then put the pond in after. The sequencing in the stormwater management plan requires that the stormwater pond is one of the first things that go in. So we will be following that.
Hang on, the plat itself is on page 31. Oh, you tell me if you want me to bring up something specific.
Oh,
for the-
no, yeah, I'll do that. So that was the stormwater. The stormwater management plan also requires seeding and topsoiling and restoration of areas that are disturbed in a certain time frame. So that's all part of the approval. The topsoil will certainly be imported. Right now, as you know, there is very little topsoil in the development area where the lots are going. So we're going to be bringing in soil to add enough depth there to do the filtering and also to allow grading around the houses to direct the stormwater where it's supposed to go. I guess just to go back as far as the process here. So when we came in front of the committee last time, it was as a concept plan. And the understanding was that the concept, really the committee's reaction should have been whether or not they like the road and the general layout, if a road should be extended to a neighbor's parcel, something of that nature. So when we left that meeting, we're of the understanding that everybody was comfortable with the road. And the preliminary plat you see today has the same cul-de-sac that was on that original concept plan that you reacted to a year ago.
There's a distance from What is the total district?
I would have to pull out a scale. I don't know if you have that information there, otherwise I can.
Here's guessing 1,200.
I can get it here relatively quickly. It's about 1,800 from Bayshore Drive. Again, there's several areas in the town that have the same situation. If you head north of Econo Foods, is past Gordon Road, and you take a right into that subdivision, that's a very long cul-de-sac. I believe that's much longer than this. I used to live in a subdivision a couple miles from here that had a long dead-end cul-de-sac very similar to this too. So it's certainly not uncommon. As far as the plating process itself, yes, this is a preliminary plat. So this preliminary plat went to the state for review, as well as Holly at the real property listings for review. So the technical review has been completed and approved. Any minor changes on the survey information was made, and the preliminary plat is approved. So the discussion about when the final plat should come, it's typical in all communities I work in, that the final plat gets recorded after the road is built and the improvements are completed on the roadway section, so that you're not paying, basically then at that time, once the final plat is recorded, those lots become lots, and then they can be closed and sold and built on. So you wouldn't want to do that in advance of the road. There's no services. You can't get to a lot right now. So that's kind of the sequence. So yeah, we come back with a final plat and it gets recorded and the lots get created. So typically what happens on a preliminary plat like this, you identify how you're going to phase that. You certainly don't anticipate selling all 27 lots day one. So you typically pick a number that you feel comfortable from a market standpoint that would be sold in the first year or two. And that's the number you do a final plat for. And then you follow up with the second phase. So it's a very common sequence that happens in all developments. To reiterate their approvals, the DNR did issue stormwater approval, storm pond approval. They did a rigorous review. We were in contact with them during that review process. The fire chief provided a statement saying he's comfortable with the road layout and access to the site. The county highway commissioner provided an email saying that he is comfortable with the driveway connection, the private road connection location regarding safety and site distance. So I guess what we're here today is asking if our plat can obtain your approval. It certainly does meet every aspect of the ordinance. I know Mariah and Tara have gone through it with a fine tooth comb, and we've addressed every issue that came up. So we're confident that what you see today is done and it's correct. It should be as a plat. So here to answer questions. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman. You keep talking about bringing in the topsoil. How much topsoil? What depth?
Yeah, so what we're gonna do is the buildings that when they get built are obviously gonna be, the foundation's gonna be setting on the bedrock surface, which is very common. And then we're gonna fill up around the foundation walls to provide drainage and to do that. So you're probably looking at 18 inches of topsoil or so around the home itself, around the foundation walls, and then going down to a minimum of probably 4 inches once you get away from the house. But we are required to provide drainage back out to the roadway itself, which is curb and gutter, and then that'll direct all the stormwater to the pond. So it's a function of filling around the homes basically, and then you can skinny it down when you're not next to the home as long as the drainage is going where it goes. But yeah, we would anticipate you end up with 4 inches of topsoil on the surface. There are some materials that are coming out of the pond that are going to be able to, that are good, is good material that'll be able to be used around some of that for fill. We dug some holes down where the storm pond is going, and that's in an area of beach outwash cobbles, and it's got some fines in it. So certainly anything coming out of the regional storm pond is going to be used up top as a byproduct. We'll have some stone material coming out of the roadway coming up the hill that'll be used as a road base to construct the actual roadway itself. So
Okay. Topsoil or subsoil?
Regarding what,
Well, I have a quarry. I had to put together a reclamation plan, and they wanted 6 inches of topsoil and 12 inches of subsoil to cover my quarry. I said, well, it doesn't make any sense. I said, if it had that before, you know what it would be right now instead of a quarry?
Yeah.
It would have been a farm.
Yeah.
So, now that's maybe different than what we're looking at here, but that's why I'm asking, are you talking all topsoil? Are you talking some subsoil?
No,
And
the-
topsoil on that? It doesn't. I'm not saying yay or nay to this. I'm just kind of trying to understand. Of course, I'm a member up at Max Walton. Well, you have to be careful how you swing your club on the fairway because it's over rock. I mean, the rock is right there on the surface, and people have built homes right on the surface of rock. I understand all that stuff. There's ways to, make sure the water goes where you want it to go. But I just want to get a sense of when you talk topsoil, what you're saying.
yeah, so
By
that's,
the way, they agreed with me that it made no sense to put subsoil or topsoil because I have a shooting range there, which people might not agree with. But I said, the last thing I want in my shooting range is trees growing and somebody walk out behind a tree and get shot. So they agreed to let it just be open stone, okay? But this is supposed to be a yard. It doesn't sound like there's a lot there for 4 inches of soil to grow any kind of.
right.
lawn.
So the top 4 inches would be what you consider topsoil, which is the black organic
Yep, yep.
topsoil. Below that would be a subsoil, which we're gonna get a lot from
Still
on site, and we're anticipating the topsoil, most of the topsoil will have to be hauled in. But a lot of the subsoils we're gonna be able to generate from the pond, and there's some areas in the southeast corner that there have some depth there that we can use. So again, top 4 inches would end up being topsoil, the rest would be material that isn't considered topsoil, it'd be called bank run, I guess, is what you probably call it. From a quarry standpoint, so historically, obviously, this quarry was operated prior to any rules or any rules regarding reclamation. So if this quarry was being made today, certainly a reclamation plan would include putting some material back on and seeding it in wildlife mix or whatever is typically what we see. So in that regard, the way the quarry is sitting today, obviously, there's nothing there. It's flat rock. So us adding soil throughout the entire developed area should be a benefit as far as filtering in.
Sure.
You're doing a variation of a reclamation plan. It's actually being done.
Right, and actually, if you do, so when I would do reclamation plans that went through soil and water, you would have an option. You could have your reclamation plan be developable single-family lots or whatever you want. What happens though is the quarry operators always chose, I'm gonna make it a wildlife area because then it's more economic to just basically put on a cover, plant something, get it to grow and walk away, then
And it would be
fix it up and make,
development.
but yeah, our reclamation plan, I guess, is single-family homes with filled soil over the existing rocks, so.
Pete, is what you just went through as far as which parts are gonna be topsoil versus subsoil and where it's coming from, is that all detailed in the stormwater plan
Yes.
itself? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, there's a grading plan included in the stormwater management plan that shows areas to be graded, finished grades, and then there's notes in there that regard how much topsoil, when it has to be placed, after construction is complete, all that, so it's in there.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Yeah, page 38. Section 201, residential use.
Oh, sorry, it's really tiny up there.
I believe in the pre.
We'll just keep bouncing back and forth and everybody's
Just
gonna
stay
get.
on the shaded area, and that's the bar to slide back and forth.
I was not hired for my technology skills. I can't get it to move now. All right, well, you guys can talk. I'll try and pull it up.
Okay. And then when it talks about the properties shall only be used for residential purposes, and I believe in maybe a prior review, even on the first go round of the quarry development, I think it might have been Dave that asked the question about, are you going to be using short-term rentals? And you had said, no, you're going to have a homeowners association. The problem is the subdivision that you talked about that's a couple miles away went to court where the residents were trying to prohibit short-term rentals, and I think you might be aware of that. And they lost because short-term rentals aren't considered a business in the case that went before the judge. But what the judge said was, if you would have said something like, let's see, no, it can't be, they can't rent or lease a unit for terms of less than 1 month or less than 30 days, then it would have upheld that notion of most residents thinking a short-term rental is a business, and the residents could preserve the nature, look and feel, and expectation of living in a residential neighborhood and not having transients go through there. So I don't know if we need that as part of a requirement, Mariah, in there, but we need to see some, I think we need to see some language relative to making sure that no rentals or leasing of those dwellings for less than 30 days.
Do we as a department, as a committee, have any statutory authority to touch covenants?
Not unless they have something in them that violates the zoning ordinance, but we don't, you're allowed to have short-term rentals.
As a statutory
So-
authority?
They could choose if they wanted to say no short-term rentals, but we can't impose that requirement on single-family homes.
So I'll step into part of my experience. That is exactly what the owners have the option of doing, is doing in the covenants, but we as a governing body at this stage can't require it. We can't control covenants, period.
And then it goes to my other question. Then they're based on this language, then if it doesn't change, they likely will be short-term rentals.
Can't make that
No, you
assumption.
can't just.
Well,
I mean, they could be.
They could be if this language here, because this similar language was in the subdivision that went to court and got thrown out. I'm just saying there's precedent there.
But it
Okay.
can't be part of our decision-making process.
You can't be a decision maker, but I'm just,
I understand, but we can't use that as a decision-making factor. For the plan.
so a decision-making factor can't help aid on the quality of life then is related to the holding tanks. So, one of the challenges that we've experienced in the town of Sebastopol with short-term rentals operating on holding tanks is basically they go more than the capacity of the holding tank, and they just say, well, we'll just have a truck come more often. And so in one cul-de-sac off of Bayshore Drive, they've had trucks because there happens to be 2 short-term rentals on holding tanks with as many as 3 to 5 trucks coming a week because they have more than the number of people in a 3-bedroom house because they have.
Understood.
Okay, so the question is, as a sanitarian, you're right, you can determine with number of bedrooms, but if you take into consideration the number of sleeping rooms, that also might be in a dwelling, and make sure its holding tank is sized appropriately to reduce the number of times that a holding tank would have to be pumped out.
Excuse me, please open the door. I apologize, but as a public hearing, we can't have doors closed. Sorry. Keep going.
So so where we have some discretion is relative to when we put a holding tank in, making sure it's properly sized.
Right, but that wouldn't be part of the plat approval. That would be when they're going to build the actual homes, and then the sanitarian would look at how many bedrooms are being proposed to share whatever the holding tank is, and maybe in a minute you can address that, Pete. And I know, even though we can't require it, that the sanitarians in recent years, because of the explosion of short-term rentals, have been asking people when they're building homes, like, do you intend to rent this out as a short-term rental? And then if the person says yes, they've often been recommending that the system then be larger. But technically you can't require it if it's sized for 3 bedrooms or whatever.
They follow the statutory post system rules, right?
But
Then is there a reason why the pout section was part of the package here?
It's a separate,
that's supposed to be the separate.
Oh,
just a separate line item, just as an interest in me.
I probably should have put a cover sheet on it.
Had nothing to do with it.
It's not not part of this.
And in fact, due to the timeline, we're probably gonna push back to.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I should have put a cover sheet on top of that because the only other discussion agenda item is if we were gonna have the sanitarian come and talk completely separately, not because of this project, about the sanitarian division of the departments we provided.
Yeah, that was the
I thought that
intent.
was part of the
Yeah.
package. since it
No.
wasn't-
Sorry, if anybody else thought that, it
John
was
just
only
gonna talk to us.
clearly a second line item.
Sorry about that.
So we're good. Yes, Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going along with Hugh's point though. I asked the question, how many holding tanks are there gonna be in
Right,
this
so-
project?
So the plan right now is unless a homeowner buys a lot and wants their own holding tank, it would be appropriate for two houses to share a holding tank and have it located between the two homes.
Two.
And the shared maintenance agreement and so forth.
Now, if somebody wants to have their own holding tank so that obviously they can meter the water they use, so they can split up the bill, but if it becomes an issue, they could each have their own separate holding tank if push comes to shove. We don't wanna, well, I guess, so that's the answer. Two makes sense, one is potential. As far as wastewater septic systems, I design a lot of wastewater septic systems across the entire state, including very large ones. So if you want me involved in some of those discussions, Brian, I'd be happy to do a presentation on site wastewater. We do a ton of that and we're familiar with all the rules.
I just want to know, because if there were like 4 homes on one holding tank, I can't imagine you'd sell anything because I certainly wouldn't buy a home that has to share a holding tank with 3 other people who might, and you brought that up, can't say they will, but might use 1 or 2 of them as rental units where they're using all kinds of water. And I'm gonna pay for it. I'm gonna pay my quarter, even though they're getting maybe 90% of the usage. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So-
So not that it's necessarily appropriate for this vote, but the developers had told me that it's gonna be a 2-week minimum as far as any kind of rental, just to deter the weekend, short-term rental stuff going on. So
Is that in the?
it is not, it is not.
Did not see it in the.
Is that gonna get added to the homeowners
Yes.
association? Okay. 2-week minimum.
Yes.
It's just.
Right,
I've
but
dealt
they
with so
can,
many
they
of
can
them
impose it
myself.
on themselves though.
Correct. So it's their own enforcement. Yep. Anything else?
No, that was it.
You have anything else to?
And this was brought up the first go around. Since everyone can put up their own fence on the top of the cliff that's facing County Highway B, is that gonna basically then be allowed to be a hodgepodge of whatever each individual owner that's along there is allowed to do? Or is that gonna be something that's done uniformly so it has an aesthetically pleasing look and feel?
Yeah, the plan at this point is, so even on site up there now, there's some large, somewhat square limestone pieces. So those would be stacked neatly along that bluff to define that edge for safety reasons. We don't have, I guess, a final exact spec on it, but that's the discussion at this point.
And then similarly for the back end, with the cliff face relative to falling rock or those sorts of things, is there any sort of barrier to keep people away from the cliff face or just reduce any risk or hazard?
Yeah, we intentionally have provided those outlets back there for that reason and to keep that separation to the homes and the yard areas. So it's considered.
That's all I
First
have,
time
Mr.
around,
Chairman.
was much more. Okay, any other questions from the team? Did the other 2 applicants wish, is there anything else you wanted to mention, Pete?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Did either of you wish to speak? Where do you go from here?
Well, I've made some notes that it sounded like either additional conditions or changes to conditions that you would like to see.
First one's so simple, which is the cul-de-sac one, right? Need to.
Right, and that doesn't become a condition, that just needs to be, if it's being approved, then he say
Accept
that it's fine for that cul-de-sac to be longer.
And I do know there are some.
That long or long.
Yeah, and you have, I don't think anyone has ever come to you with a plat with one that's longer than 1,000 feet that has been denied. Again, I'm not even sure.
Big cities, not.
Right, I think that comes more from like an urban
Yes.
concept. But I'm trying to pull up, so page 21 is, and on to 22 is. Initial list of drafted conditions are, the ones that I've made note of, and tell me if you think I've missed something, to add would be to add a new condition that they need to make sure that, whatever they're doing with the roads is in compliance with Sebastopol's ordinance.
As a note, that's reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, they would have to do that anyway, but yeah.
Correct.
That they should comply with state regulations regarding blasting, road construction, et cetera, including whatever dust management.
So
provisions.
how about instead, a variation of what we do on conditional uses, that statement, where they are expected to comply with all state,
Everybody
federal,
else's
and
stuff.
local regulations.
And it
It's
just
generic
lists some
enough.
things, okay, so we can use the standard, yeah, what you usually use for conditional use
Because you know, like,
permits.
the dust is an environmental thing, but it's also an OSHA thing.
Okay, so we can use that and then we can list as examples, but not an exhaustive list, the Sebastopol Road ordinance and then blasting.
You know, more of a recognition that reaffirming that they have to follow the appropriate rules that are related.
All right, so the Sebastopol Road one and the blasting, road construction, dust management, et cetera, will go under that umbrella of needing to comply with other local, state, and federal. And then you wanted to add to the list of utilities that are gonna be buried, telecommunication. Yes. And then you had two others that were brought up. One that was with regard to the topsoil source and placement. The depth, I think Pete covered, and then but
And it's
the
in
other
the
piece was
plan.
plant types as well. And then there was discussion about screening at the rear of development, but I'm not sure what you want to do with that.
Let's see how that we, does anybody see how we could even accomplish any kind of screening? I mean, it's 30
Part of
feet
the
up.
plat review. I mean, I think, well. But anyway, those are the notes.
I think it's, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I think from the screening perspective, it's not necessarily that you have to have screening, but for example, if you have a wood pile that you put in the back, so it's not in the front, there may be things like it's covered and.
That's more like a
right.
covenants kind of thing, though. I mean, it's not really something that can be done as a plat oriented. Unfortunately.
So don't worry about the screening part of
I don't see
the.
how we could.
I don't really either, because that was probably more related to the.
We have a
use.
hard enough time with the conditional use permits that getting screened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I wasn't entirely clear with the topsoil source placement. Depth again, I think is covered by the plant and the plant types, like what. That.
I'm
I
gonna
guess we
ask-
didn't ask Pete that question.
Right, yes, I'm gonna ask Pete. Under the circumstances, where's the most likely location of the materials that would be brought on?
So, Mike Parent works for JF Construction, which is a large contractor in the county. So as they're bidding jobs in the area, if there's excess topsoil, that may be a source. I know
So the
JF
fair thing would be to
Construction.
say that they would be likely to be from within the county,
Yes,
is what I'm getting at.
I think that's very likely based on trucking distance.
Not exactly cheap to truck material.
Right.
And that's exactly what I see happen all the time in my developments. Municipalities I work
Okay, so then that would become a
So-
condition, reiterating what it sounds like they're gonna do anyway.
So does it need to be a condition, folks? You?
I think Mr. Fisher raised a good point, relative to the subsoil is how much, if it's just 4 inches of topsoil, that doesn't seem much, and that I don't think, I necessarily think that Ken or Mr. Fisher got a satisfactory answer about how much of the paint run is gonna be placed.
That those
The grades
fill
are,
material were approved by the state level.
right, it's shown on the grading plan, which
It's on the state's.
is part of the-
grading
yes.
plan. Okay. Morgan?
We have always passed these on, haven't we? It's more, of-
Class.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm okay, and I would make a motion to approve it as presented with the stipulations that we have implemented at this point in time.
So if there's been a motion, is there a second?
I'll say on
Any further discussion? There were no other points that we were talking about earlier.
the only, I mean, I guess you should reiterate, well, I guess you already kind of talked about the cul-de-sac being longer.
It's a difficult lot in order to stay away from.
Right, there's not really anywhere for it to not, I guess you could make it a loop. I didn't make any other notes that were things that sounded like conditions that you guys wanted. But I want to make sure that I understand whether I'm putting a condition on there about the topsoil source. Was that a no all the way around? No. Okay, 'cause it's-
And basically the grading is substantially orientated around the stormwater, the natural stormwater control once the development is done, namely shedding that water towards the road. So it hits the curb and gutter and transitions to its storm retention pond. So that drives part of your elevations as well. Kira, was there anything else you missed? Everybody happy? Kind of, sort of, under the circumstances? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? You?
No,
Oh, you did, no.
No.
No also?
wait, so.
It's okay that you guys don't understand it. But my question, well, I don't want to gum it up and I don't want to be here till 12 o'clock tonight. But where, because this was the right decision to pass it on. That was, there's no question of that. When does the question, these folks came here worried about, when does that get addressed?
The question.
If ever,
You just did it.
if ever.
Yeah, thanks.
You just did it.
But we have always passed this on. This is the way that we are
There's no grass.
basically have to do it. But their individual questions that they brought up,
You
is
just
there
did it.
no, there's no,
I mean, I think the notes that I made when during public comment, I already addressed, in our opinion, the conceptual plat for it to have gotten kind of smaller in a way in terms of lots is fine. Whether the outlots are landlocked or not, outlots are not considered lots that are necessarily going to be developed, so they don't have to have road access. It's not uncommon at all for an outlot to be like a chunk of land along the water that maybe multiple property owners or something. The stormwater,
But the right way to say it is an outlet is not a buildable lot.
right? Yeah, I mean, you can come back later and subdivide an outlet if you want to, and then it would have to have road access, but it doesn't matter when it's called an outlet if it has road access. The stormwater discrepancy issues that were, or perceived stormwater discrepancy issues, that's up to soil and water and the DNR, and they've apparently already given their approval. The comprehensive plan quotations, I didn't really have any notes about that. The endangered species section, like I said, we reiterated what the DNR told us would be the regulations with regard to that. Groundwater contamination, if that's something that could have been addressed by soil and water, I see that they would have.
there we go.
And if anything, we're doing a better job of capping what's already there.
Yes, we are.
Oh, yeah, there were comments about the escarpment, right? Even though it clearly is showing, the escarpment of Door County as far as the zoning regulations, that part is not mapped as part of the escarpment.
There's a man-made
Exactly,
exposure.
it's human.
He's
so,
got
yeah.
every quarry in this county
It
has
is
got
like-
exposed.
Immediately
state.
to the north, there are zoning rules that would come into play, but even if the zoning escarpment regulations covered that property, it doesn't mean that it can't be developed. It just has regulations about tree removal and driveways. So,
All right.
so I guess,
It is not an
Did
easy
that answer
thing to
your
deal
question?
with.
Yes, it-
It is not always easy to deal with. The simple reality is that there's very finite window stuff.
yes.
right, it's not, it's not a zoning decision today, it's a plat review.
Hence the reason why we went from one member having 56 hours worth of work on the last review, another one having 32 hours of work. The last review, not counting the meetings we actually have. Yes.
All right.
Shall we push off the pouch thing to,
I mean, I told John that I didn't think that we would get done before 4:30, but
let's just leave it.
he may have run back on an inspection for all I know since I
No,
told him.
I figured the department would.
Okay, so we will move item 8 to a later agenda, and sorry, Hugh, that you brought all that for today. Okay. So I guess,
September 1st.
yeah, item 9, we'll move the pouch thing to a different one. September 1st is the day that the county board supervisors and department heads have the retreat, so it won't be meeting that day, but on the 15th, we think we're gonna have at least 1, maybe 2 hearings. And then I believe that's the timeline when we'll look at the 2023 budget.
So far, the October looks like nothing.
We don't know that far out, but I would just advise that you just keep those as placeholders, and we'll let you know as soon as we know.
Second that?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?